it's hard to explain to somebody in their 20s or early 30s how popular Washington was back in the 70s and 80s. It was the Washington, at the time, Redskins, not the Green Bay Packers that were on TV every weekend. The biggest rivalry in the NFL at that time was Washington head coach George Allen and the Cowboys and head coach Tom Landry. Second was probably Steelers, Chuck Noll and the Raiders. Some of that was John Madden, I believe, was the coach, or the Dolphins, Don Shula. Like Dan Snyder has done an egregious job. I mean, Donald Sterling was a bad guy and a bad owner, but the Clippers were never a huge brand. Marge Schott took the Cincinnati Reds, arguably the most popular franchise in the 70s, early 80s, and ruined them. And Dan Snyder did as good a job as you possibly could do to ruin and tarnish a great name. It didn't matter who was quarterback. Billy Kilmer in the 70s. It could be Joe Theismann, Mark Rippon, Doug Williams. Washington was really good for a long time, but Snyder was greedy, treated people poorly, about the money, about himself, and hopefully the new owners, I mean, it can't be difficult, will just embrace the community. When I was a kid growing up, the first game I ever remember watching was 1972. It was January or February. It was the Super Bowl between Washington and the Miami Dolphins on a small black and white TV in my bedroom downstairs. We had a Frank Lloyd flat roof house in Grayland, Washington, and downstairs I had a little black and white TV. And I can remember on a Sunday watching a Super Bowl in my little black and white TV. It wasn't nearly as big back then. And Garo Yepremian was a kicker for the Miami Dolphins. He screwed up 14-7. Dolphins beat Washington in the Super Bowl. He screwed up, tried to pass a ball. Washington grabbed it. That was their only touchdown of the game. But those Washington teams were my favorite. Tyrone Talbert, Charlie Taylor, the wide receiver, Larry Brown, the running back, Billy Kilmer, the quarterback, Mike Bass, the cornerback, Pat Fisher, Chris Hamburger, Tyrone Talbert on the defensive side. I mean, that was literally, 50 years ago, and I can remember half the roster. And it just remained. Joe Gibbs took over. What a proud franchise. And Dan Snyder basically killed a great brand. Killed it. Hard to do. It would be the equivalent of ruining the Braves or the Dodgers or the Yankees brand. The equivalent of that. It would be the equivalent of ruining Michigan football or Oklahoma football, just ruining the brand. How bad would you have to be for how long to completely ruin the brand? People now don't even think of Washington as a top 10 franchise. Forget winning, just merchandise. There used to be a 25-year waiting list for season tickets for Washington. Look it up back in the 70s and 80s. It's hard to explain to people that are 25 years old or 35 years old how big Washington was. They were part of the biggest rivalry in the National Football League with the Dallas Cowboys. So Snyder has been an utter disaster. And Robert Sarver with the Phoenix Suns, Marge Schott, Donald Sterling, it's not like owning any other business. It's front-facing. It's public. Your employees are vital rock stars in a community. Part of the charitable part of the community, the entertainment portion of your community. They're in schools with kids. They're filling stadiums. They're starting businesses. Pro sports can mean so much to a community, and so you have to get the right owners. It's funny. I go skiing in Utah, and the area I ski has some really beautiful homes on the mountain. And one of them is Dan Snyder's. And every time I ski by it, I'm like, God, worst owner in pro sports. The sport I love, worst owner right there. Good riddance. One of the things I love about having Draymond Green as part of the volume is that I think there are two athletes or former athletes in America that stand above the rest in terms of being analysts. The best former athlete, currently a TV analyst for any network and any sport, is Charles Barkley. He literally gets in the news cycle. He is in the news cycle. He creates stories. And the reason he does is because he's brutally honest. I'm watching him the other night, and Charles Barkley comes out and says, don't waste your time. Some of these games aren't worth watching. Why he would get criticism from the blogs shows you how out of touch the blogs are. That's why he's popular. Because the blogs play it safe, and Barkley doesn't. Let's face it, Celtics, Sixers, Bucks, easily the best teams in the East. Miami's good enough to make somebody uncomfortable. Cleveland's good enough to make somebody uncomfortable. Those are the three best teams. Now, the West is wide open. The East isn't. And the second person, a current athlete that is also a podcaster or broadcaster, is Draymond Green. Draymond and Charles, to me, are the best current or former players in any sport: baseball, football, basketball, hockey, MLS. Why? Because they're fearless. Doesn't mean they're reckless. They're fearless. And it's a great example of, the internet. Twitter is constantly rewarding people who play it safe and say the right things. And Barkley's not on Twitter, and Draymond doesn't give a shit. And for all you young broadcasters out there, 22% of the country is on Twitter. 78% aren't. It's not real life. Barkley, there's nobody in the NFL, and I work at a network with a lot of good analysts. There's nobody in the NFL that's as relevant or creates news like Barkley. And I think mostly because people are a little timid, a little fearful of saying something that rocks the boat, contrarian, getting beat up on social media. But I love the fact that Draymond Green came out and said, I couldn't believe LeBron was gassed the other night. LeBron is repped by Clutch Sports. Who reps LeBron? Rich Paul. Draymond doesn't care. Draymond is friends with LeBron James. He doesn't care. I have no problem with most analysts have relationships. Troy Aikman obviously knows Jerry Jones, but I never felt Troy Aikman had a problem ripping Jerry Jones and criticizing Jerry Jones. But I think that shows the fortitude and the fearlessness of Draymond Green. He doesn't care about his relationships. The bottom line here is LeBron did look gassed. Jason McIntyre was at the game. Game was over. LeBron was done. Hands on hips. It should be 20th year in the NBA. But I think Barkley and Draymond have really separated. Not to say others don't have talent. They have separated from everybody else in the analyst game. One a former star, one a current star.